So, the McLarens had a clean but feisty fight. Both of the Williams DNF'd, and Saubers took a big step forward. I'm Rachel, and this is my Austrian Grand Prix race ramblings. So, starting off with the weekend rating, as always, I have given this a 7 out of 10. It was quite fun at the beginning. I don't think it was as fantastic as it could have been, given Franco Colapinto got in the way. We'll talk about that. I don't think that was acceptable, but it's a beautiful track. I'm always going to kind of like give it bias because of that. They did announce that there is a contract extension through 2041, I believe, which I'm very excited to hear about. It's kind of interesting to me what tracks are and aren't being renewed. You wouldn't think that like something like Austria would get renewed more so than Spa. But I guess given like it is Red Bull Ring, there's more incentive there, and Red Bull has probably more funding to put behind it. Quite an unfortunate weekend for Red Bull, considering it's their home race, which is not very fun for them. But what goes up must come down. So yeah, beautiful track, definitely on my bucket list. It's just so stunning. That and Hungaroring are just gorgeous to me. I kind of prefer Austria, but like we have some quite beautiful races back to back with Montreal and Austria. They're just stunning. They're just very visually nice to look at. It was a great start. Obviously, the first 20 laps were fantastic. Then quite a boring middle. And again, the ending wasn't quite as fun as it could have been. We'll get to that though. So don't want to like repeat myself too much. Let's move on to the quali result. So very poor qualifying from Sainz. The last 3 weeks or so, he has not made it out of Q1, which is kind of odd. His experience at Williams so far has been kind of odd. Took him a second to warm up, which makes sense. He had a good period, and now it seems they're in a little bit of a lull. I don't know if it's some developments that haven't been sticking to Carlos or what. But they were even like changing his seating position this weekend, which they were talking about during practice 2, kind of like, is that helpful? And David Coulthard was like, I mean, it's changing your entire view, what you see and how. So obviously we didn't quite get a chance to see if that was helpful given his experience in the race. And apparently he had floor damage in qualifying, so that makes sense as P19. Quite unfortunate. Nothing quite out of the ordinary for the rest of qualifying, bar Alex Albon not making it through, which is kind of interesting to say. That we're like, I'm not used to seeing Alex Albon and Isaac Hadjar. I'm kind of curious that both of those didn't make it through to Q3. Not like crazy, but kind of surprising. Talking about crazy, Bortoleto P8 is fantastic. His best start. Lawson P6 is very fantastic. He's above Verstappen, so that's nice to see. They were talking about Lawson quite a bit in the practice 2. They were talking to Laurent Mekies, kind of being like, what's your vibe with Lawson? And they were kind of like, it's hard to make changes like this mid-season. You've got to give him time. And so it's nice to see that he's finally having some real results, because it would have been quite unfortunate if Red Bull had screwed it up by putting him in the Red Bull too early and it just wrecked his confidence or something, and he was never able to get back there mentally, which was very possible. I mean, entirely could have happened. I'm happy to see it doesn't seem like it's going that way. Norris P1 is not a surprise. He was quite well all weekend. I'm happy for him that he seemed to recover well from Montreal, because as I said, I was quite concerned. Just mentally, it would be difficult to come back from. I think probably the break we had in between was good for him. Happy to see Leclerc and Hamilton in P2 and P4. They brought some upgrades this weekend targeting qualifying pace, because that has been their struggle. The race pace has been okay. Qualifying pace hasn't been fantastic, and obviously it's hard to make up in a race when you've qualified very poorly. So happy to see they've took a positive step forward, because I am a Ferrari fan, of course. So I want to talk about that actually, because I think it's interesting. Because I was thinking about Austria, and I was reflecting on my first season I watched, which was 2022, and I watched Austria was one of my earlier races, and I'm a big Carlos Sainz fan. More so than I am now, which is what we'll get into. But I remember watching that race, and it was going to be a Ferrari one too. Carlos was about to overtake Max Verstappen, and then his engine blew, and he had to DNF, and I was distraught about it. And I think it's interesting because Carlos didn't even start this race. Spoiler alert, we're jumping ahead. Carlos didn't even start this race, and I didn't have that dramatic of a reaction. I think I'm curious to see if anybody else feels this way. As F1 has been more competitive and more exciting, I'm more and more a neutral fan, just excited to watch all of it happen. I think when there is heavy dominance, maybe we all tend to lean more. And this, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm saying we all. I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say if you find yourself leaning this way. I think when things are more dominant, you might be more likely to find somebody to hold on to just see how they perform and see how it goes for them. Because it's like, who's going to win the race? Like when Max was winning everything, you're like, well, he's going to win. Let's see how Carlos does, just as an example, because he's my favorite. There might also be something to say about like when you start, especially I came in through Drive to Survive, you become attached to like personalities and you know less about the sport and you know more about the drivers. And so maybe there's something there as you learn about F1 in general, but you become more of a general fan. I don't know. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think maybe it is more tied to just dominance or whatever because it is so competitive right now. It's just kind of interesting to see how it's playing out, and I don't feel the need to attach myself to any driver. So let me know your thoughts on that. Let's jump into the race result now. Again, Norris won. Great for him. They were saying it was his race to lose, and absolutely it was. I thought Piastri had a chance, and I really think he could have had a chance. It just didn't quite pan out. Essentially, he stayed very close within the first 20 laps. By lap 11, they were really challenging. That lap 11 specifically was when they had that real challenge there back and forth. He was challenging again for the next 10 or so laps without really getting a good chance. And eventually he locked up and he had a flat spot, which kind of killed it, but Norris had pit then. Anyways, Piastri decided to stay out longer because the choice was given to Oscar, which I actually appreciate. That way you can't get mad at the team for it because it was a group decision. They were like, do you want to pit now and you'll have a 1.5 gap, but you'll be on the same tires? Or do you want to have better tires, you'll have a better delta and be like 4.5 seconds behind? He chose that. In the end, it ended up being a bad pit stop, so he's closer to like 6 seconds behind, which was unfortunate and obviously a lot harder to make up. So he didn't quite get there in the second stint, though he was closing in. They all pit again, and then he got stuck behind Tsunoda and Colapinto, who were fighting. Tsunoda kind of got in the way, but it was fine because he probably didn't see him. That was like an engineering issue. They should have let him know. Colapinto knew he was there and like shut the door on him. By the way, the blue flags were waving. These were lapped cars. They needed to get out of the way. Colapinto just like pushes him off track. Almost, I don't know if they actually contacted that it was close if it wasn't. Completely unacceptable, and we'll talk about Colapinto because he's in a specific situation, and this race I do not think is a good race for him to have considering the situation he's in, but we'll talk about that. But I just need to say that because I think really we could have had much more of a challenge at the end if that didn't happen. He lost a lot of time on that point. Piastri lost a lot of time at that because he got stuck behind the lap cars and then he almost gets shoved off. That could have had serious championship implications. We're lucky that it didn't. And actually unacceptable. I think he needs to go stern talking to for that Colapinto. Like, what was that? Like, because he knew he was there. I actually don't understand how that happened. So I need to move on because it's making me irritated, obviously. But I wish that didn't happen because it would have been nicer to see what would have happened because if Piastri did have pace on that last stint, he could have caught up to Norris, and he was catching up to Norris if we had a couple more laps. Or that didn't happen. I think we could have seen another fight, and that would have been really interesting. Obviously, Lando was happy that didn't happen because it gave him... Though he did keep his calm. He did keep his calm for the first battle, which will be... I think he's probably... I was really concerned after Montreal. Given his performance today... literally not a concern at all, even when I'm very happy for him, because not only did he win in a very dominant fashion, he had control, and they fought cleanly together. So that was nice to see. Moving on to the Ferraris here, Leclerc and Hamilton, P3 and P4. They were racing by themselves, not even racing each other, each of them racing by themselves. Hamilton had seemingly less pace than Leclerc, never caught up to him. Leclerc was by himself, never catching up to the McLarens. So as we can tell, like a good step forward for Ferrari, but not enough. And that's sort of what Leclerc said, though they are on the podium. Leclerc was on the podium, so that's nice to see because they haven't been on in there too much. Then we have Russell, again, kind of by himself the whole race. Not really much to say about him. Lawson P6 is great. Again, like I said, they were talking about him a lot this weekend, and you're kind of at the point where it's like, okay, it's been long enough that he's been in the Racing Bulls, how's it going? Nice to see he got some real points today. That'll feel good. Again, interesting to me that Hadjar didn't pan out well this weekend. Not sure what happened there. Probably just some sort of fluke. I don't think anything's developed in a way that hasn't worked for Hadjar and is working for Lawson. So we have Alonso P7. Great for him. He's kind of woken up all of a sudden because he had no points for a while, and he's waking up and getting pretty consistent points. So that's nice for him. We have Bortoleto P8, and he had a little fight with Alonso, his manager, which was kind of funny. They talked about, he was like, I was kind of expecting Alonso to be not so harsh on me, but he was fighting like he was for a championship, and I thought that was funny. Yeah, I wouldn't expect any less. But points for Bortoleto for the first time was fantastic. I'm very excited for him. Also, Hulkenberg up from P20 to P9, double points for Sauber. Don't know what development they did. Well, I know they had a floor upgrade. And I think they also had an upgrade in Barcelona. So they've obviously taken some positive steps forward. Seems to me that they're developing. Well, I don't know. We're not quite at the point yet where we'd stop seeing. Especially because we're in the Europe season now. This is when all the upgrades are coming. Probably after this is when we will stop seeing teams developing, because they're going to be much more focused on next year for the new regs. I would have thought that Sauber would be one of those teams that was very much not developing and we're just kind of going to give up this year. So it's interesting to me that they're not, that they are continuing to develop. We'll see how that pans out next year. I mean, I guess the positive there is start to see how things are working, but it's not even those things will necessarily apply next year, so I don't know. Interesting to see. Maybe they just want more money. I don't know. So again, surprised by Hadjar. Gasly dropped out of the points. He qualified in the points. I don't know what Alpine is. They're not, well, they're the worst car. Them and Sauber. And Sauber's taking a step forward, so that could have constructors implications. What is the deal with Alpine? I keep asking that. What is the deal? Just sell. Just sell already. Anyway, Tsunoda P16. I'm not talking about Colapinto because I have a section on him and I've already talked about him. But Tsunoda P16, well, but that is because he did crash into Colapinto, sent Colapinto spinning, so he got a 10-second penalty. Only a 5-second penalty for Colapinto. Whatever. I feel that's kind of lenient, but whatever. Albon had a DNF. Not quite sure what was wrong there. Sainz also had a did not start. Let me actually change that here because I have DNF. Did not start though because something happened with his brakes. He couldn't get going on the formation lap. They had to abort it. Then he did get going, but he had to get him through the pits and his brakes were on fire and he couldn't start. That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate because now there's actually damage to the car and they didn't even get to race. So that really sucks. Who else DNF'd was Verstappen and Antonelli. Essentially, Antonelli either locked up. Well, he did lock up. Maybe because I don't know, something happened. Maybe he didn't realize how soon everybody would brake. It was not a real rookie mistake, but even on the post show, they were saying yeah, but he's raced here before in F2 and F3. What's the deal? So yeah, but forgiven since he doesn't make many mistakes. This is kind of his first big mistake during a race. Nobody's going to be so mad at him, I think, just considering the fact that we're at this point and this is kind of the worst thing he's done. It's okay, who cares? In the end, I don't think it was too much damage to anybody. That's going to be too expensive. Obviously, he took out Verstappen, which is unfortunate. I think Kimi, the response that Verstappen had was quite nice. He didn't seem too upset. Kimi obviously looked like he apologized right away, it was his fault. He owned up to it seems. So it was nice to see Verstappen be very chill about it. I think if it was anybody else, we would not have seen that because it's first lap, first corner. Yeah, Verstappen's going to be mad if anybody takes him out, but especially because, but there was also a conversation of that's what happens when you start P7. You're much more in the mix and subject to everybody else. So qualify better, which, yeah, I don't know why Red Bull didn't qualify it very well today, but yeah, it sucks for Red Bull at Red Bull Ring. No points for them today at all, which is interesting. Moving on, well, not interesting. Obviously, we know what happened, and Tsunoda hasn't quite got there, which actually let me touch on now because they were talking to Christian Horner, and I didn't quite catch what he said at the start, but I think they were talking about Yuki and talking about, his phrasing was, it's a hard car to drive, but it's not that hard, talking about the Red Bull. And it's that's obviously, at this point, I don't think we can say that's fair. I don't think we can say that's fair. I think it's clearly a difficult car to drive. What? What? Like how Yuki was getting points and now he's not. It's the car. Fix your effing car. You have a problem? Fix your effing car. Moving on to best driver, I put Bortoleto. Hulkenberg was very close because like P9 or P20 to P9 is crazy, but I'm going to give it to Bortoleto because he's a rookie and because I think that was a very great race for a rookie, especially in his situation. It's not like he has had the opportunity to do like a lot of fighting anywhere. And so first points are him. Stayed there the whole race where things were kind of crazy. Very excited for him. Nice to see. It's nice to see the rookies perform well. And I can't tell if this makes it worse for new rookies or better. I mean, Bortoleto was never bad, but he was never like, up until now, he did not have a car where we could really see where he was at. Ollie Behrman has been doing pretty well. I think there's still something to say about like giving your rookies time. And no pressure is probably the biggest part. There's like not much pressure on him, Bortoleto, because like who else is in the Sauber Academy? Nobody really. And it's like Audi next year. Everybody know, like we all knew this was just kind of a year for whatever. Same with Kimi Antonelli, and it's been turning out very well. Not too much pressure on Ollie Behrman because like who's coming up in the Haas and he's got the Ferrari support. And that's been turning out well. And who's the rookies with the biggest trouble? Colapinto, if you want to call him a rookie. Lawson, if you want to call him a rookie. And Doohan. And they've had the most pressure, and so there's something to say there. I think that's really the conclusion, and you still have to give them time. You've got to give them time and space to warm up, and they'll likely do well. I mean, still you're going to run into situations like, yeah, Logan Sargent never quite got there. I hate the mid-season thing because I'm like, well, you should have just not renewed him, but whatever. But I think it was fair to take him out. I'm still upset about Jack Doohan. I don't think that's fair. And speaking of, let's move on to talk about Franco Colapinto. He had a 5-race contract, and those races are up, and he is now on a race-by-race basis, which, as I mentioned in practice 2, is like not an unusual thing. But usually that's for money reasons. It used to happen all the time, but it's like dependent on funding. This is not dependent on funding. This seems to be performance-based. So every race he's got to perform, and I do not think he performed this weekend. I think the situations he got himself in were not good. The fact that he almost took out championship leader, even when he was a lapped car. What? It's just... And I've been like hesitant. And I'm hesitant to say anything because especially like he's Argentinian, and them and their fans have not given themselves a great... They're feisty. With love. I don't see this to be bad. With love, it's been feisty. And the fans have been feisty in here and in IndyCar. And I don't want to like promote a bias of any sorts. But I think... Because he is like fast. But it's like, he's very like Red Bull. Like because it's fast, but there's an aggression there. And again, I don't mean that to be like stereotyping or in any way. There's an aggression there that can turn, if you channel it correctly, you're Max Verstappen. If you don't, you're just crashing into everybody, and that is expensive, and it doesn't matter how fast you are. You're not getting points and you're expensive because you're crashing the car, and that doesn't work. And I think you're better off with a slightly slower but consistent driver. But it's my biggest comment... Because there was also other situations today where they were talking to Esteban Ocon, and he said it was a bit too tight when he was racing with Colapinto. And so... And Colapinto was crashy last season as well. I mean, like... But my biggest point... Sorry, let me go back to that. Because I don't want to put too much blame on the driver. Because again, I think a big thing is pressure. When you're putting a driver under pressure, they're just never going to be able to perform. And so Alpine is putting themselves in a position now where they're not giving either driver the space to properly grow or hone their skills. If you feel like you're constantly fighting for your life, as Franco is every race now, you're never going to feel comfortable, and that's going to make you make silly mistakes. Same thing was happening with Doohan. You're feeling all this pressure. And Doohan, quite honestly, was in a couple unlucky situations. And now Doohan is not given the time at all to even develop his skills. If they had just stuck with one, there would be improvement because there would be less pressure, and they'd also have more races and more time to develop themselves. But because it's like now race by race, and they're starting with one, now doing the other. Both of them are under too much pressure, and neither of them are given enough time to actually hone in their talent to be able to perform better. And that's reflective because now they're the only two drivers without points, Colapinto and Alpine. So I think that's unfortunate. And I don't want to like completely diss Colapinto. I think I do have an obvious bias towards Alpine because I think he was the one done the most dirty. But they're doing Colapinto dirty now too, but I also don't, like, I just don't think... The bias comes from, I don't think Colapinto is or necessarily will be doing better. I think had Dua not had the pressure and had the time to improve, I think he could be doing better. Like, that's where my gripe comes in. Also, because even if he hasn't, if you lose your seat to somebody who's doing equal as you, what's the point there? I'm going to move on because I don't want to upset the fans. Because I really don't mean to be any way about it. I really don't. I don't have a bias towards Argentinians. I don't have a bias against Franco Colapinto. It's just like an awful situation that everybody is in. Because what is going on with Alpine? What is going on with Alpine? I wanted to have a McLaren check-in because I think it was interesting that they chose to let them race today. I'm happy they did. I think that's how it should be. I think it's a brave choice considering what happened in Montreal. But I think they know that they can't keep both drivers happy and be like controlling it. You can't... If Oscar Piastri runs away with the championship in the end, or Oscar Piastri even just wins it, whatever, Lando's going to be pissed, but he's not going to be pissed at the team because it wasn't a decision that the team made. If the team ever interferes, then that's when it becomes a problem with the drivers, because it's like, if you just lose the championship, damn, guess he was better than me this year. If McLaren comes in and says you can or cannot race in these situations, you're going to start to feel a different way, because that is when you can start manipulating, intentionally or not, you're messing with the championship. And so I think it's a very positive thing that they just let it happen. And I think it was brave, especially, like I said, considering Montreal. I'm happy it turned out that way. They were racing cleanly. It was a feisty race there, but it was clean. Again, I wish I could have seen what would have happened had Colapinto not gotten in the way, but that was fun. That was nice to see. I'm excited for more of that. I hope we get more of that, and it seems we will, because I think for a while there we were kind of like, papaya rules, whatever, all of this, what? Are we just like not going to be able to see the McLaren's race? And we have been 2 races in a row, and that's very fun for me. Okay, moving on to driver standings. I actually have quite a bit to say here. So we have Piastri and P1 and Norris P2 still. The gap is now 15 points. So lots of that is tightening up. Verstappen is now at 155 points. Obviously, no points today. I think now we can... I mean, anything can happen, but I think we can start feeling good about McLaren is probably going to win the Drivers' Championship. Even Red Bull, I don't remember if it was in relation to constructors or drivers or both, but Christian Horner said, we're not thinking about the championship, and McLaren's have it. So if Christian Horner is saying that, I think... Because Christian is always like, there's a way. So I want to still up there even after 3 DNFs back to back, which is kind of crazy to me. P8, great for him. And he's still got a 19 point gap to Ocon behind him. Hulkenberg is now up in P10, which is very nice for him. 22 points, so there could be movement there depending on who develops better, the Sauber or the Haas. Hadjar is in P11. Alonso has jumped up a bit to P13 with a couple good points beacons there for him. Sainz jumped down a little bit with his DNF. Lawson made a big jump up today to P15 because he had great points today. And again, the only drivers without points are Colapinto and Doohan. And like I said, we know why. But I just have to say, this top 10 is wacky. I would not have predicted Albon, Ocon, and Hulkenberg in the top 10 at all. I would have for sure thought it would have been Racing Bulls or Aston Martins. 100%. So that's crazy to me to see. Moving on to team standings here, we have Ferrari back into P2. The Ferrari and the Mercedes have been flip-flopping. It was Mercedes with, was it a 1-2 or at least a 1-3? I can't remember. Was Kimi Antonelli second? In Canada, I can't remember. Anyways, they had great points last year, obviously, or last weekend, obviously. George Russell won in Canada. Ferrari has now jumped them. We'll see how that development plays out. Obviously, I didn't speak about this, but obviously we were like seeing where the Mercedes would end up today. They weren't quite anticipating Mercedes to do well here, and they didn't do fantastically, not horrendously. So I'm not concerned. I think this could continue to flip-flop depending on developments and everything. McLaren, I think we can say they've won it. I think like 417 to 210. And even like the Ferrari and Mercedes, so Ferrari has 210 and Mercedes has 209. That could, yeah, that's definitely a flip-flop thing. Red Bull down from 162. I think they're going to stay there. I think they're going to stay fourth. So that's kind of all I have to say. Very fun race. I love Austria. I'm so excited for Silverstone next weekend. I'm very excited for Silverstone because Lando's going to want it. He will want it. And so we'll just have to see how that plays out. Or maybe the Ferraris will take another step forward, continue their step forward, and Lewis will lock in again and win that again. Oh, how fun was that last year? Oh, how fun was that last year? I love Silverstone. Silverstone is so good. Another bucket list for sure. But it's expensive, so somebody's got to send me there. Hi, people, if you're listening, send me to Silverstone. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry I haven't posted in a bit. As I've discussed, I've kind of taken a break from the IndyCar videos. I still love IndyCar, but just like to preserve my passion, I'm taking a step back away from it because it feels like it leans all very negative to me. That I don't feel like there's much of a story. I can tell that's positive in any way. And a lot of it just goes back to how can we grow the series? What are we doing? And it's not as fun. And I don't want to lose my passion for it because I'm like forcing myself to make videos about it. So pausing on those, I really am still trying to ramp up the amount of videos I do. I'd really love to do like a midweek race talk where we can also chat about IndyCar there and however capacity I want to. Just a news check-in. So nothing falls off when I'm just focusing on the Grand Prix, but we'll see how that goes. I'm still settling into my work schedule, and it's been a couple of short weeks because I've had graduation, and then there's like other holidays and whatever. But we'll see. At the very least, I am hoping to try to be posting once a week, but because even when there isn't a race, but I didn't feel like there was much news last week, and also I just needed a bit of a break because I had a bit of a chaotic month. So, anyways, none of you care, but thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're listening to this and you'd like to watch it, it's on YouTube. If you're watching and you'd like to listen, this is on all podcasting platforms. Please comment, like, subscribe, rate, share, follow, all of the things, and I will see you next week for Silverstone.